We're chatting with Mr. Gary Griffith, who is the former police commissioner. Good morning, Mr. Griffith, and welcome. So I didn't want to
Good
go
morning.
too deeply into the actual issue. I wanted to give you the opportunity because there is the debate regarding whether or not this is an issue or it's not an issue. But there's also the deeper conversation regarding individuals using their influence or using their public office to get things done for their colleagues, or just regular members of society feeling as though in order to get things done they need to do it through some type of contact, or as we say, by pulling strings. But this morning, give us a little bit of a background on the firearm users license and how it connects to that report that was done in the parliament against you I think a couple of years ago. I think it was about 2 years ago that report was filed in the parliament. When was that laid? Yes.
Yeah, hi, good morning. So there were three reports pertaining to audits. This is the audit government. They've done an audit with Prashad and Barrington on FUS. They did an audit with Stanley John on firearms. They did an audit with 4 jokers who they appointed and forgot to even speak to me, which breached natural justice, which is why the court told them that it couldn't be serious. They did an audit pertaining to the Auditor General's report. They did an audit on the SSA. That is what they do. They did an audit on procurement with the police. So they are the audit government. And an audit, that means you hire people, pay them big money of taxpayers' money, millions of dollars, and then they probably type exactly what you want, and then you go in parliament and read it like a coward because you can't speak it outside, because when you go in parliament, it's the one place that you can lie and mislead the country and not be sued. So that's the whole concept of this thing with the firearm audits. And the reason I can state that is that after 3 years, not one name has been called, not one person arrested, not one person charged pertaining to what was extracted from these audits. So the only thing that people benefited from were the individuals who were hired and left with hundreds of thousands each of taxpayers' money, because nothing came about of it, and which is expected. This is similar to Emailgate. So this was Emailgate reloaded with the firearms. The SSA situation is Emailgate Part 3. So that is the concept. And the reason I can say that as well is that in his comments based on these so-called reports, he said that persons had their semi-automatic firearms and changed it to automatic. That is a lie. If that happened, people will be charged. That is a criminal offense. How come one name has not been called, one weapon not seized, and nobody charged? He then said people who were involved in domestic violence were approved with firearms. That is also impossible because your wife has to approve it. Had it been true, why did he call a name and have the weapon seized? He then stated that persons actually had committed criminal offenses, and with those criminal offenses, they were able to still get a firearm. That is impossible because you need a certificate of character. And if it is that they did get it by beating the system, why didn't he call a name? Why didn't he seize the weapon? And then finally they claimed and said in these reports, persons actually paid bribes and police officers received it. Why didn't he call a name? Why weren't these weapons seized? And why weren't these people arrested? Because it's a criminal offense. So it just to encompass the lies, the misinformation, because the one thing that Keith Rowley is good at, you say the same lie over and over and hope people will believe you. So as it goes to this situation now that you're speaking about, I'm not going to go in depth as it pertains to conversations between myself and the Prime Minister or vice versa. I think the main issue is the hypocrisy, the double standard, and that's what people are missing. It's not about whether it is a person in public office will contact someone who has the authority. My personal view is that is not a problem unless the individual tries to deliberately influence you, intimidate you to commit an act out without you doing due diligence and have to go through that due process. So, for example, when I was Minister of National Security, I was bombarded with hundreds and hundreds of persons officially writing to me stating that they applied for firearms 10, 15 years, and the commissioners did not even have the common basic manners and courtesy and professionalism to even acknowledge their request. So they will write to me. I will then write officially to the Commissioner of Police stating this has been brought to my attention, submitted for your information. Not submitted for your information and action. So if the Prime Minister knows somebody, whether it be a good friend or not, and the person and he wants to see the status of it, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem lies is that this is the same Keith Rowley and the PNM government who had a problem when I was providing firearms to the small businessman, to the farmer, to the small shop owner, to the person who wants to defend his family, protect his family, to the person who involved in hunting, who involved in that as a sport. You had a problem with me giving it to these persons after doing thorough background check. But it's okay to give to your friends in high places. And that is where the hypocrisy comes in. That's where the double standard comes in. because there have been over 25,000 applications, 25,000. And that is because of the failure, incompetence, and inefficiency of commissioners before me who were too lazy to do their job, because there was a law, and the law stipulated that if you adhere to certain criteria, you should be eligible to get a firearm. And because of that backlog, I was able to change it from 500 odd a year that the others were providing to about 2,000. And that 2,000, half of it would have been to law enforcement officials, past and present, who needed it because of our backward process where you're a police officer or prison officer. When you leave duty, you have to keep the weapon remains at the station, and then you go home and you could be targeted and your family can be targeted. That became a problem. So in that 1,000, 1,200 odd that I would be given to civilians every year, that is out of 25,000. So that would have taken me more like 25 years to deal with the backlog based on the pace that I was going at. Presently, Christopher is going at 100 per annum. So it'll take 250 years to deal with those who have just applied. And out of that, it meant that I would have given out 0.3% of the population firearms, 0.3%. And this man has the audacity, Keith Rowley, to state that this was given to everyone. 0.3% is everyone. It's obvious Keith Rowley did his maths he studied maths in August, to have the audacity to say that that was being given to everyone. And in those 7,000 that were issued, not one was lost, not one was stolen, not one was used for a crime during my 3-year period. The lies that he stated about 100 of these legal firearms were used for crimes. I ask you all, Trinidad and Tobago, you're aware, how many times have you heard someone with a legal firearm commit a crime? Virtually non-existent. What he did is use the words by Christopher when she stated that persons, there have been 100 legal firearms that are part of criminal investigations. That involved a security guard who lost his firearm. That involved a soldier who had a negligent discharge. That involved a police officer who lost his firearm or had a negligent discharge, or a law-abiding citizen who used his firearm to defend his family. That is not used. The 100 firearms were used for criminal offenses. 99.9% of murders committed by firearms in the last 10 years under Keith Rowley have been by illegal firearms, and the country knows that. So my point being is that you can't be, it's saying it's okay to look to see the status for firearms for your friends in high places, but then you criticize the same commissioner of police when he was providing it for the law-abiding citizens to defend themselves. And that therein lies the problem. Another point that you just mentioned, it is very important. It shows the breakdown of our administration in the public service, because this is what happens in Trinidad and Tobago. Because of our failure of proper systems to make sure people can get something without trying to beat the system, pay someone. That is what happens. People is who you know, who you can contact, you pull a string, and it is not just about firearms. This involves the transport, the Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Education to get somebody in a school, the Ministry of Health is fast track to get something for you to get chemotherapy. It has to stop, and that is because of the bad management of the government. So what I did with the FULs was to find a system to prevent that corruption, to prevent the blackmail and the extortion and the bribery. And by me doing that, it affected big criminal enterprise in the police service.
Have you seen any improvement in the disbursement of firearm user license since your time as police commissioner?
No, it has actually been worse. And at least under Stephen Williams and the others, they were issuing, I think, 300 to 500 per annum. And if they continue along that line, I said that would have taken about 80 years to complete the 25,000 applicants. I was going at 2,000 per annum, which meant it would have taken just about, could be 15 to 20 years to deal with the backlog. Christopher has now put it down to 100 per annum. So it will take 250 years for all 25,000 applicants to even get an answer. So, and again, it is because of the failure of the administration. Christopher stated she's too busy, she has too many things to do. And that is why, because of commissioners before and after me, the state has been sued left, right, and center, tens of millions of taxpayers' dollars being lost with lawsuits because of the failure of commissioners of police to adhere to their responsibility as a commissioner. When someone applies for a firearm, have the manners, have the basic courtesy, have the professionalism, do your work, pull up your sleeves and stop being lazy, and either tell persons you are not entitled. There are many people I rejected, many. So that is the truth. Because I work hard. I was working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week as a commissioner. I would spend about 8 to 10 hours on a Saturday to deal with the backlog. It's the same thing I did as Minister of National Security with the backlog of work permits. We have 120,000 persons who are in this country illegally because they've overstayed their time, and many of them have their applications in the Ministry of National Security, but you have a lazy minister that doesn't want to deal with it. And those are the things that cause the corruption, because the persons now will try to find some immigration officer, somebody in the ministry, pay them something to see if it could be fast-tracked for them not to be deported. Somebody will know a police officer in a station and pay him for him to send it up the file for him to get a firearm. So what I was doing was cleaning up the corruption, and because of that, certain persons in the criminal underworld, in the police service, as few as they may be, had the ears of the politicians. We have to get rid of Gary because he's mashing up big business. Corruption is something that is rampant in this country, and part of it has to do with because of the failure of our administrative process. If the administrative process is efficient, effective, and those who hold that office will do their job and not be lazy like earlier Christopher, then you wouldn't have the situation of persons trying to pay bribes and blackmail and extortion to get firearms, to get something in the Transport Commissioner's office, to get a document, to get something in the Ministry of Health, to get your child in a school. If we do the administration right, the corruption will be diminished.
Are there any policies that you recommend to help to decentralize that power where firearm users' licenses are concerned? Do you think that there should be a unit that could be set up that tackles directly with issuing the licenses, that can deal with that backlog, as opposed to having one police commissioner whose responsibility is to go through 25,000 applications?
Well, no, it's not that I was going through 25,000 applications. Let me clarify, but what you're spot on, that's exactly what happened before me. Persons were applying, and the only person who had the authority really and truly would have been some sergeant or a superintendent or corporal in a station that can block it. So it showed the ignorance of Keith Rowley when he said that Gary Griffith was overriding the decision made by some people, because some of these police officers were involved in the corrupt activity. We had persons applying for 10 years and their application would remain at the police station. So the corruption took place there. And the reason they will reject it is to tell the person there's no threat to your life. It shows the ignorance of those police officers, because there was nothing in an application for firearms that can use that as a criteria, as a concept to deny the person, because that person will take me to court. He will go to the police appeal, to the Firearm Appeal Board, which is there if it is that you're rejected. And then the Firearm Appeal Board will say, where in the law gives you the authorization to reject the application because there's no threat to your life? No, there's background check that is done, there's psychometric testing, there's due diligence. The officers go to the home, you check to make sure the person is of sound body and mind, he has no criminal record, he has no DUI, there's no domestic violence situation. Those are the things that you can do. But because persons didn't want to pay, certain police officers may just come and say, well, Commissioner, we have rejected this because there's no threat to the person's life. I had to override that because I will be the one that was sued. So that was the problem. It being held back at the stations. But because of Keith Rowley being incompetent and a dinosaur, his concept is, if that person rejected it, you as the commissioner shouldn't override it. And even if they had done that for one of his friends, he would have contacted the same commissioner to see why was this person's firearm rejected. I'm certain that's what may have happened. So what I did is exactly what you said. We formed a police compliance unit. So when it is rejected, we will check and make sure this rejection is null and void. Or we also had situations where persons were approved. And when it was approved, and I signed the provisional, we then, through the compliance unit, we'll find out, hey, this man has a criminal record, and we would not give him the firearm. So the compliance unit was there to prevent the corruption of police officers deliberately holding back persons who were entitled, but also preventing persons from getting it who were getting it because they paid some bribe and they were not eligible because of some corrupt police officer. So that system we had. I also had something with the FUL card with a chip. And that chip would have ensured that if at any time, whilst you have a firearm and there's a domestic violence situation, there's a DUI situation, it will immediately be red flagged to the system of the FUL compliance unit department to know to seize that weapon immediately, because somebody could be under DUI and the FUL department may not know about it, and the person will continue to carry his firearm. Somebody may have a domestic violence matter and the gender-based violence unit may know it and not the firearm unit. So the chip would have red flagged any single person who has a firearm. And if at any time he commits a criminal offense, it would immediately be sent to the FUL department through that system. They removed that as well. They removed the compliance unit. They've gone back to the old time days, similar again to the technology I had with the police app, which was 485,000 hits, the most in the country, the online reporting, and the 482 Gary contacted me directly. They removed all that technology to go back to have a drop box for people to give recommendations. So what Ola Christopher is doing is shutting down and dismantling everything that I did to transform the police service that caused public confidence and trust to move from 14% to 59%. And after I left, it has now gone down to 8% because of the incompetence, the mismanagement, and above all, the political interference into the police service.
Thank you so much, Mr. Griffith. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to continue our discussion this morning. We want to thank you for giving us that full understanding of what is happening in regards to the debate on the firearm user's license and those screenshots, giving more context to those screenshots that we would have seen in the newspaper.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate we weren't able to discuss the real issue with Tobago crime, but...
Yeah, exactly, but we have more time next week, and hopefully I can see you then and we can go into detail with the rising crime on the island, because we're now at number 16 in our motor toll here in Tobago.